Education is preparation for reparations.
We're now going to move to hear Priscellia Robinson, who is a founding member of Queen's Court Chambers and Head of Chambers. In 2019, the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights awarded Priscellia Robinson as a UN Fellow, alongside receiving UN training in international human rights law. Thank you.
Greetings to everyone. Greetings. I want to say that I am indebted to all these people who are actually on the panel today, because they have all actually mentored me at some stage in my life and career as a barrister and also as an academic. I'm particularly actually grateful to Professor Kwame Akufu, who is actually my supervisor currently at the University of West London, and I want to thank him for all the hard work that he's done. I know he's gone through quite a lot, but in training me and others in the sphere of law, so I'd really like us to give him a round of applause. So I've come back quite empowered. I've just probably about 4 or 5 days ago stepped off the plane from Gambia and Senegal, looking at my ancestry, and I visited the island, Gori Island. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, which is an island of which my ancestors potentially were taken from. And the reason I mention this is because when I got to Gori Island and visited one of the, as they would call it, slave houses, which is rude in itself, there were four rooms for women. The first room for women was the room where all of the women potentially were taken. There was another room for women who were virgins, and then once they were, their virginities was taken away from them, they were forced into the first room that we spoke about. The third room was a cupboard, I'd call it that, where women were imprisoned for rebelling and resisting against the human rights violations that we're facing. And the last room, in fact, once you see the door of return, there was a corridor on both sides, one for men and one for women who had been chained together. And the reason I make mention of this is because I thought about their journeys. This collective journey and all that we're doing today. I'm also the president of Birthmark of Africa as well, which helped to organise this event. And the fact that we equally are together on this journey, regardless of whether we do law or not, we are here together. And I just want you to remember that journey that our ancestors went through, and the fact that they were chained together, and we must continue this journey as one together. I was very fortunate to work with His Excellency Judge Patrick Robinson, alongside Professor Vereen Shepherd and Professor Robert Beckford, who is also here today, and another lawyer, Natalie Reid, on the quantification for reparation for transatlantic slavery, which was the Brattle Group report, which many of you have heard of, to say that Britain owes around £18 trillion. Now, it's very important when we look at this report not to take it just in itself. As lawyers, we often do have to quantify. We have to start with the quantification of what is owed. And the reason why that report is very important is because, as we can see, and we heard from Sister Esther, who I've worked with on many occasions, that this reparatory justice work is being hijacked. We are being told what we should receive. And it's really important that we do look at this report. It's the first of its kind. I know that Professor Beckford had done a series called The Empire Paid Back, but we took the quantification of African chattel slavery into another realm. And one of the things that I do want to mention surrounding this, in terms of how we got to the damages that are owed, which is technically compensation, was looking at the reparations for the period of African chattel slavery, but at least that of reparations after what I would sort of say we're in the phase of colonialism. And one of the things we couldn't quantify, which is very interesting, is the psychological trauma. That was very hard for the Brattle Group and us as 5 on the committee to actually quantify. And I want us to really, really bear that in mind, because the report is extensive in itself, but there was so much more that we wished to do with the report, but we just couldn't do it because there was no case law that could assist us with quantification. So whenever we talk about the law and we look at it from the perspective of also history and also what's happening now, we do also need to think about the fact that things will come up, and to give ourselves and allow us to have space in order to quantify at a later date. That we shouldn't accept anything, whether it's a law or just through social justice, that this is what we can have on the table, because we also need to look at quantifications surrounding crypto. Where are we going now if we just had given a wad of cash? So there's so much to think about. But skipping from that report, there is something that I want to touch on, which is around the legalization of African chattel slavery. And Jackie is right. African chattel slavery was never legal in the UK. And I've taken this a little bit further in terms of this research, past the Somerset case, going before the Somerset case. In fact, in 1102, the Council of London adopted a canons as a decree against slavery. This is before African chattel slavery actually existed in its form, in which they said, let no one dare hereafter to engage in the infamous business and prevalence in England of selling men like animals. We can even go a bit further as to 1215 of the Magna Carta of clause 39, in which it says, no free man shall be seized or imprisoned or stripped of his right or possessions, or outlawed or exiled or deprived of his standing in any other way except the lawful judgment of his equals and by the law of the land. African chattel slavery was never lawful. And what we find with cases such as Somerset and those before and after was this dilly-dallying of judges having a bit of a fun time as to classifying our people. Is it legal, is it not? And so I really want us to hold on to that. But also something that was mentioned in regards to the Somerset case where Lord Mansfield talked about positive law. Positive law in itself is the law that we as, let's say, men and women make. But there was a law before positive law, before men started to make law, which was the law of God. And this is not just from a biblical sense, but actually from a legal sense. Because the law of God, the law of our Creator, always deemed that people of African descent were human beings. And therefore to even try to classify this in the sense of positive law is wrong in itself from a legal standpoint. We do need to think about that. What we also found in terms of this is how do we advance this? We can advance this from a international perspective, yes. But there is also avenues for us to advance this from a legal aspect here, domestic law. Unjust enrichment, for instance. So if we look at the law of equity, the law of trust, we have organisations such as Lloyd's of London, who enslaved African people, also insured African people, and they do hold trusts currently to this day. And unjust enrichment is when you are enriched from an illegal act. So if there are currently trusts that are out there which come from unjust enrichment, then the duty of those trustees are to ensure that those who may be beneficiaries are contacted. Now, I do wish to go into a bit more detail, and I must say that I did a presentation at the University of Cambridge on this and stunned a few of them as to how it would take what they would classify as private actors to court. And I do have a paper which I'm happy to share with everyone on this, but this is very important that when we're talking about African chattel slavery, we, as people, whether we're lawyers or laypersons, always remember that we are not to be told what is owed to us. And when I walked on Corey Island and I felt the spirit of my ancestors, I'm telling you for a fact, even being a part of this battle group report and saying 18 trillion pounds based on the quantifications, for me, was angry to say that is not even enough. So I just want us to always think that regardless of what we're being told through the law or through social justice, that we as the living remnants, the descendants of those who were enslaved, must always hold on to the fact that this is not something to be played with. And the future of our future generation, we are holding the key right now, because the decisions we are making surrounding this situation, any compromisation that we wish to do, will have a detrimental impact upon them. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscellia Robinson, for that contribution.
Education is preparation for reparations.